Hello, I am a 3D model of Robin made using the very techniques you'll learn in this course: modeling, texturing, and animation.
Welcome to Blender 3D Essentials. We are going to open Blender together for the first time, and it's going to feel like the cockpit of an alien spaceship. That's at least how it felt to me when I first got into 3D, but don't worry, I got your back. My name is Robin, and I am a 3D designer and animator, specializing in 3D for graphic design. My software of choice is Blender, which sounds weird because it's a free software, but don't let the price fool you. This is the best 3D software I've ever used. It can do almost everything, from charts to Hollywood VFX, but I've been told we don't have 1,000 hours for this course, so I've pared down to the designer essentials. Like no fighter jets, no castles, we'll be making stuff that is useful in design. And there are projects throughout the course where you can practice what you're learning and get some nice portfolio pieces as well, and everyone gets their own unique brief so that your projects will look distinct from everyone else who is taking the course. We'll start with a tour around Blender's unique user interface, and then we'll make a 3D bottle. You'll learn how to make 3D shapes and make them look like glass. You'll learn how to make 3D characters and how to animate them. We look at rendering, which is how you make images, and I'll show you techniques of how to wrap a design around a 3D model. The course is for anyone who's felt intimidated by 3D. Maybe you're a graphic designer or a motion graphics artist. You're just, curious about how people make those 3D graphics. Whatever brought you here, you will learn all the foundations to make just about anything in 3D, and we will take it step by step. So let's get into it. What do you say, Tiny Robin?
Huh?
Well, you have the sign-off, so...
No, I have the intro. You do the sign-off.
I'll see you in the first video.
With the course.
Okay, you're in the course. This is it. In just a moment, we're going to start to learn Blender, or you're going to start to learn Blender. I'm gonna teach you. I think you're going to be surprised by how capable this software is, because, well, if you've noticed the price tag, it's free software. But I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that it is actually the most capable general 3D software that I've used. And how's that possible from free software? It's a whole thing. We have many parties. It's the Blender Foundation, which is supported by donations from you and me, but also from like big corporations. And the big corporations, they like Blender being just this central hub to build around. And so companies like, I think it's Nvidia is one of the biggest sponsors. I think Meta and Google as well. Bunch of huge companies, and this is what's keeping Blender afloat, or more than afloat actually. It's growing. Like, it is growing really fast as a foundation, as a community, as a software. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that in just a few years, I think Blender's going to be industry standard for most 3D work. That might come back to bite me if that doesn't happen. No, I think it will. So all that to say, I think you did the right choice in starting to learn Blender, but I'm done blabbering. Let's get into the course. First things first, you gotta download Blender. So I am on blender.org, and at the moment of recording, we are on Blender version 4.3, but I wouldn't be surprised if that number's gone up by the time you come here. They come out with a major update. It feels like every other month or so. So you'll press the big download button, and it's detected that I'm on a Windows system. It'll probably detect yours too, but you'll find all versions down here in the drop-down. So just press the download button. So while that's downloading, also go ahead and download the exercise files that come with the course. You'll find the download link somewhere on this website. I don't know the layout of the site. You'll find them. And also remember that you can change the speed at which I talk using the cog wheel, which is like in the corner on one of these sides of the video player. Some people think I speak fast. Some people think I speak slow. Tune me to your liking. But be wary, if you go too low, I'll sound drunk. Alright, when it's downloaded, just install Blender like you would any other software on your computer. And the first time you open it, it should look something like this. You may get a window asking you to configure some settings. Just press OK.
The defaults are completely fine. And then you'll be here. You'll see a splash screen in the middle and the rest of the program around it. So just click somewhere in the 3D viewport to dismiss the splash screen, and welcome to Blender. All right, a little bit of setup before we start. Let's go up here to the Edit menu and down to Preferences. And under the Interface tab on the left, we have the Resolution scale. When I click and drag that scales up the entire program. Very useful for larger screens. Maybe you want to shrink it down. I'll set mine to 1.5, I think will be a comfortable size for reading. And then close that. Now the only difference you should see between your interface and mine is down here in the left-hand corner. There's a little mouse icon. This is for showing you what I'm clicking with my mouse. So when I left click, you'll see the left button light up. When I click my scroll wheel, that lights up. Now, if you're on a Mac, that might be a bit of a confusing thing. I'll get back to that in a moment, but it will also show my keyboard presses. So if I click B, you can see B shows up here. I'll right click to cancel that. C, that shows up. And if I hold down Shift, you'll see that button. And if I press A, you'll see, oh, I pressed Shift A. I'll try not to obscure it with the menus like I did just then. Now I'm on a Windows computer, so when I press Control, that'll show up as Control/Command. If you're on a Mac, you press Command when I press Control. And when I press Alt, Mac users press Option. So Control A for you on a Mac would be Command A. Okay, if you are on a Mac and you use a Mac mouse, you were probably confused back when I said I clicked my scroll wheel. Because Mac mice typically don't have a clickable scroll wheel. And this also goes for, say you brought your own laptop and you're using a touchpad. Well, so if you're serious about 3D, you should probably get a 3-button mouse. But if you find yourself without one, here's what you do. You go back to Edit and Preferences, and down in the Input tab, you have a button to emulate a 3-button mouse. And while we're here, go ahead and check if your keyboard has a number pad on the right-hand side. That's this grid of numbers. If you don't have that grid, then go up here to emulate numpad as well. That way, when I press, say, 1 on my numpad, you just press the number 1 wherever it is on your keyboard. And that should be it in terms of setup. I think we're ready to start using this program.
This program can make VFX for Hollywood and worlds for video games. And that's why there are a lot of buttons. Okay, but you don't need to know all of them to make things that are useful in design. In fact, you're going to be using the same 5% over and over again throughout your career. And those are the 5% we'll focus on in this course. 3D is very different from other tools, and it's a lot to take in. Like, there aren't a lot of familiar looking buttons or icons in here, and I get it. It can be overwhelming, but I promise you, it is very much possible to learn by yourself online. That's how I learned it. This video is going to be just an overview of the software. I'm just going to show you around to the different areas that we're going to be visiting over and over again later on, and we're not going into depth on anything. No need to take notes just yet. I just want to give you a sense of the context, just where are the different things, so that when we later go into depth on each part, you have a bit of an idea of how it plugs into the general whole. So just sit back for now. Let me show you around.
So, welcome to the world of 3D. First off, how do you move in 3D? Well, to turn around your center, you'll press down on the middle mouse button and drag. Remember, I have the little icon down here, and you'll see when I press the middle mouse button, it turns off when I start moving. I think that's a little bug. I'm still holding it down. If you use a Mac mouse, you'll just use the touch sensor like this to move around. And if you're on a laptop touchpad, you'll press down with 2 fingers and just move around like this. There's also this it's called a trackball up here in the right-hand corner. And if you press that and drag, you'll also orbit around. Orbiting is what this is called. Second, we have zooming, and I'll just scroll in and out on my scroll wheel. That does that, and you'll scroll however you do on your system. And also there's this button over here under the trackball, which is a magnifying glass. The way to use it is you click down on it, hold down the click, and then just move up or down. That'll zoom in and out. And then we have panning, which you do by holding down Shift while clicking the middle mouse button, or the way I showed you how to orbit around on your system. And there's also this hand button, which you use the same way. You click down on it and you drag, and then you can move side to side and up and down. All right, that's how you move your camera. Orbit around with a middle mouse button, Shift middle mouse button pans, and scrolling zooms. But how do you move the object in the scene? Well, let's click it with a left click, and we can go to the toolbar to the left here. And this is the move tool with the 4 arrows. We'll click that, and a gizmo appears. This is a gizmo. And if we click either of the arrows on it and drag, we can move it around in 3D space. You can also click the little planes between the arrows, and that'll allow you to move it on the plane of those 2 axes. So right now I'm moving it on the red and blue axis at the same time. And you can also click in the middle of the gizmo, and that'll move it freehand from the camera's perspective. The next tool is the rotate tool. That'll give you a different kind of gizmo. And if you move your mouse over any of these circles, it'll highlight that circle, and that'll allow you to rotate on that axis. If you hold down Control, you'll even snap to, I think it is 10-degree increments if you want to be precise about it. And if you just click in the middle of the ball, you can freehand rotate it. If you're unhappy with your rotation, you can, like most softwares, Control or Command Z to undo, and you can do that as many times as you want. The next tool is the Scale tool. The Scale tool will stretch out your object. You get another gizmo, and you can stretch it out on either one axis at a time, or uniformly from the center, or on each plane, which will stretch it out on 2 axes. And this final tool, this is like a combination of all the other different tools. If you don't want to go over here and click each one each time, you have the move, you have the rotate, and you have the scale all in one. Say I don't want a cube, I want something more exciting. How do I delete it? You delete it by pressing delete on your keyboard. And how to add something new? Well, that is in the add menu up here. If we click that, we get all the things we can add to our 3D world. And a lot of these things you're never going to use, and most of the things you're going to use are under the first menu called Mesh. A mesh is a 3D object. So whenever you want a 3D object, you'll add a mesh. So let's go for, say, a cylinder. And you can add as many objects as you want. Let's go back to Add menu, and yeah, let's do the funniest one. Let's do the monkey. And we can go to the Move tool, and we can move the monkey on top of the cylinder. Maybe we'll use the Rotate tool to make it look like it's kind of resting on the cylinder. Turn it around, back to the Move tool. I'll move it down a little bit until it feels like it's resting on there. Maybe I want to scale this out so it's more like a platform. I'll scale it on this plane. That'll only scale it in the 2 horizontal directions and not in the vertical one to just like fatten it up. Now we have a little platform for it, but you'll notice it's all gray. Gray is boring, so let's add some color to it. Where do we do that? That is in this window. This window has a lot of tabs. We'll visit a few of them. The one dedicated to color is the bottom one, the Materials tab. So we'll go here, and with one of the objects selected, we'll click New, which adds a material to that object. And the material has a bunch of settings, but the most important one is this one, the base color. So let's give it, I guess like a kind of teal, nice teal looking color for no particular reason. But we can't see it in the 3D viewport. What gives? The reason is, by default, the 3D viewport only shows everything in gray, which is very useful for understanding 3D shapes without being distracted by color. But we have different view modes, and those are all up here. The 4 little balls in the corner. The first ball, this is the wireframe ball. If we click that, we view our 3D in wireframe mode, and we can see through our objects. Very useful. The next one, that's the gray mode, which we were just in. The next one after that, this is the material preview mode. And when you click that, your system might choke for a little bit. Like, it's not unusual that it'll lag for, I don't know, 10 to 15 seconds while it's just loading everything it needs into your system. That'll probably only happen the first time though. And with this selected, we can see the nice color on our object. And we can go to the monkey, and we can add material to that as well. Now in this window, there's no material here, so we'll click New, And this material, we can make it a little, we can make it like dark brown. I feel like maybe desaturate it a little, make it a monkey color. And the final view mode up here, this is the rendered view. When we click that, we still see color, but we also see lighting information. We see a shadow and we see highlights. And those are dependent on the lights in our scene. And we do have a light object. You can't see it right now, that's because it's out of view, but we know that we have one because it is in the scene outliner on the right. This is a list of all of our objects. And if we press this light, we have now selected the light. And we can now zoom out until we see that we have the light selected here. Let's go to the move tool and move that light over, and you'll see the shadows and lighting information react to that. So I can move it a little closer, make it a bit brighter, and get a nice like Rembrandt lighting on the monkey. This is fine art we are doing here on Bring Your Own Laptop. So let's say that we are super happy with what we just did and we want to take a picture of this monkey. Let's zoom in, and taking a picture in 3D, that is called rendering. And we go to the render menu up here to do it. Now, don't be confused, there is a rendering button here too. This is a workspace. If we click this, then it'll change the entire workspace to be something different. That's not what we want, so let's go back to layout, where we were. And this is the button you want, render on the left. So we click render, and we click render image. It does it, we do get an image, but it's from the wrong view. And that is because Blender does not render from your current view, it renders from a camera object, which we also have in our scene. You'll see it in the outliner. I'll click that and zoom out, and we can see there's our camera. This is the angle that it was taking the picture from. And so we can move this over to where we want it. We can move it down a little bit, maybe rotate it back to... Oh, gotta watch out not to click on the frame of the camera, that changes the focal length. So I'll undo that and just click the gizmo, make sure to do that. Point it at the monkey, and then go back to render and render image. This is a very difficult way to get the framing you want because you can't preview it before going to render, right? So the way most 3D artists prefer to set the camera position is to look through the camera and move around. To do that, we go to the camera button over here on the right. You click that and you go into the camera. But you'll notice if you start moving around, you'll exit the camera right away. So there's a secret little button that I personally think should be more prominent to get the camera to follow you around. Let's click the camera again and press this tiny little arrow up here to the right of the trackball, which will open a new menu. In here, there are a bunch of uninteresting things, don't worry about it, but go down here to view, and there's a view lock option, and we can lock camera to view. I know this is too hidden, but now you know where it is. And now, if I orbit around our monkey by pressing on the scroll wheel, the camera will follow me. So I can make it, I can zoom it in and get a nice looking composition on the monkey, and then uncheck camera to view so that I can go out of the camera again, and go to the render menu, render image. And now it renders from that point of view. If I'm happy with this, and I want to save this picture, then I go to image, inside of this render view window, right? I go to image, save as, and I can save it somewhere on my computer as any type of picture, like a PNG, a JPEG, even things you've never heard of, like I don't know, Targa, you probably haven't used unless you worked in 3D in the 90s. And crucially, clicking this button is separate from saving your project file. If you want to save this scene file and go back to it and work on it later, you have to go to File, Save As, and that'll let you save a .blend file, which you can open later to keep working. So let's close this little menu here by clicking on the edge of it. When our cursor becomes a little arrow, we can drag it and just drag it all the way to the right until it disappears. And that's it for the quick overview. Now you know basically every step of the 3D workflow, and what we'll do next is just go into detail on each one.
Alright, quick breather. If you're getting value, hit like and subscribe. And remember, this is not the full course. That is on bringyourownlaptop.com. The link is below. It's got a bunch more videos on modeling, texturing, and animation. All right, let's dive back in.
This is randomprojectgenerator.com. The point of this site is to generate a random brief for everyone who's taking this course, so that when you follow along with the projects, you don't end up making the exact same thing as everyone else. Everyone gets a slightly unique brief, although there are commonalities. And when you follow along with the course, you'll make something that doesn't look conspicuous in your portfolio. So for this course, let's click on Blender Essentials here and click Generate My Project. And I got an industrial and edgy chili oil brand. So again, yours will be different from mine, although yours will also be a liquid that's in a bottle so that we make kind of the same product. But if you're not happy with what you got, you can go down here and click Retry, although you're not allowed to click it more than 3 times, okay? So let's read mine. You've been hired by Daniels, a new chili oil brand with Guys, we gotta amend this with an industrial and edgy style. As the resident 3D artist, it is your job to help define the visual aesthetic and shape language of the product. The shape language, that's basically what do 3D shapes of this brand look like. The same way you might make a color palette, a 3D artist might design a shape language. The client wants you to have full creative freedom. They'll need your help with social media content, the bottle's design, and the packaging. Additionally, they're looking for a 3D mascot to represent Daniels and an animation for advertising purposes. So I'm happy with this, and I'll click Download as PNG, and this will be the project brief for all my projects going forward. Let's talk about the user interface in a little more detail. I'm now in a new file, and I got here by clicking File, New, and General. That opens a brand new file. And this window is where we have spent most of our time. This is called the 3D viewport. This is where we do all of our 3D work. Down here, there's another window. This is the timeline, and I can play it by clicking play, and the playhead will play through, and you'll see your animation if you have any. We don't, so it's very boring now. I can drag that back to the start.
And by the way, I know it's a lot when I'm going over it without context like this, but I just want to give you a general overview. Don't worry about the details. We're going to come back to all of these buttons later on. I'm going to familiarize you with what all of them do, but for now, it's fine to just sit back and try to take it in as best you can.
On the top right here, we have our scene outliner. Outliner is a list of all the objects in your scene, and it's great for organizing things. You can organize things by adding new collections as well. There's a new collection button on the top right. When you click that, you get this box that you can double click to rename, and I'll call this, say, lights. And I can click this light and drag it into the lights. It works like a folder. Under the outliner, there's the properties window, and you can resize any window by clicking between them when your cursor becomes a 2-pointed arrow, and you can resize them any way you want. This window down here, this is the properties window, and it has a bunch of different tabs. The top tab, this is the render tab. These are all the settings for rendering, which if you remember, that is how we made an image. So when it makes an image, it will use all of these settings to do it. Under that is the output tab. This is where you change things like the resolution of your output image and the frame rate of your animation, things like that. And then we can skip down to, this is the scene. And in scene, what's useful here is to change the units. I like using the defaults, which is metric and meters. That's what I enjoy, but I've heard some of you guys out there enjoy imperial units, and I won't judge. The next tab after that, that's the world tab. This is where we change, well, the world, what's the world? The world is everything that's around our 3D objects. It's like infinitely far away. And we can see it if we go into rendered view. Remember, up here, the 4 balls, you can change the way you view your 3D world. If you click the rightmost one, we view it with lighting information. And at the moment it's very gray. Your light may be more powerful than mine, but if we go to the world tab and we change the color of the world, then we can change the way it's lit. So now everything is blue and the box is lit with blue from every side. And bring that back to something like a dark gray. And turn on the gray viewport mode. Let's skip over the next tab, which is not very useful. And you know what? We can skip over this one too, and this for now, and this. This you won't use, this you won't use, not in the course of this course. Can I say that? The course of the course? Not this, but all the way down here we have the materials. This tab is only available if you have a mesh selected. If you click on a light, you'll see that changes and it becomes a light icon. So this is context dependent. So if I click a mesh and I click the materials tab, this is where we give our objects color and shading information. But when I click a light, it becomes a light tab, and that's where I change the power of my light, the color of my light. If I click the camera, then it becomes a camera tab, and I can use it to change the focal length of the camera, stuff like this. And this is the default workspace. But something that does make Blender's user interface a little unique is that the workspace is very malleable. It's easy to add and remove windows, and that can be very useful. For instance, maybe we want to be able to see our 3D scenes from two angles at the same time. What you'll do is you'll go to one of the edges of the window, say the top edge, right click, and you can split it. Let's do a vertical split. Now when I move around, I can move the split and click to confirm it. And now I get two 3D viewports. And you can do the same kind of thing by moving the mouse to the corner until it becomes like a reticle. And then click and drag into the window, and that'll do the same thing. And I can split that in two as well. And maybe I want to use this top window to see my 3D scene from the top. I can go over to the trackball on the right and click the top pointing like arrow, the blue one that says Z. And if I click that, then I'm viewing it from the top. And this bottom one, maybe I want to view that from X. So I'll click X. And now I have three separate views of my 3D scenes from different angles. This can be very useful. But you can also change the type of window that this is. The type of window that is on the top left, it's this little drop down here. And you'll see this is different between this window and this window, because this has the outliner icon and this has the 3D viewport icon. But it doesn't have to be. I can click this and you'll get a lot of different options. There are so many types of windows, but we'll only use about, I don't know, like 5 of them. And we already know most of them. This is the 3D viewport. And over here we have the timeline, which is the same as below. There's the outliner and the properties window. Those are the ones we already have open. And if I click the outliner, now this window becomes an outliner too. So you can really start to screw things up. And I mean that, like that's what happens to me all the time. I make a mess of this whole window and I just want to get back to the default. How do you do that? Well, the trick to do it is to check the workspaces up here. These are basically presets of windows. So if you're doing animation, you may click the animation workspace, and this is what Blender thinks are the windows you want open when you do animation. And you can add a new one by clicking plus over here, and let's add a new version of what we just had, which is a general layout. If we do that, then we get back to the default. And that is how to screw up your interface and fix it again. This class is a little theory on how computers view 3D objects, but for one, it's not boring, and for the other, you're not allowed to skip it. We'll be very quick, but this is extremely important to understand for the future of our work in 3D. And to demonstrate it, I'll just delete everything that's in the default file and add a new object. Remember, adding is up here in the add menu. Under mesh, we get all our meshes, and for this example, let's use a UV sphere. So we get a sphere, but you'll notice it's not a smooth sphere. It's a sphere with a bunch of little squares. And why is that? The reason for that is a computer cannot in 3D show curves. Curves are basically impossible. The computer only understands straight lines. And the way to fake a curve is to add just enough straight lines. When I add an object, I get a little menu down here on the left. Now it says add UV sphere, because that's what I did. And I'll press the little arrow here to expand that menu, and I get settings for it. The settings I'm interested in now are the segments and rings. If I click the segments and I drag to the right, I'll increase the number of polygons. And you'll see the more I add, the closer it gets to looking smooth. At least on that axis. Let's add some on the other axis as well. And you'll see I get closer and closer to the illusion that this is actually a perfect ball. But the problem is, the more of these polygons I add, the more taxing it is on my system. And if you get into the tens of thousands of polygons in a scene, and you really quickly can when you start working with complex objects, then it's going to run very slow. This is the reason why video games in the early 2000s looked so jagged compared to today, because you need more powerful computers to display more polygons. And not only that, but working with high poly objects, that's what we call it when there are many polygons. It's difficult to model with, it's difficult to texture, everything's trickier with a lot of polygons, which is why there are ways to fake having a lot of polygons without actually having a lot of polygons. It's very common when you're new in 3D to just want to add a bunch of them, but I want you to try and refrain from that, and I'll show you how. Let's reduce the poly count again to something close to where we started, to where it's very faceted and not very high resolution. And I'll right click on the ball and click Shade Smooth. And I think this is so cool because the mesh hasn't changed. If I go into the wireframe view up here, the first ball, you'll see the polygons are still big, but there is a clever algorithm to just fake on the surface to fake having smoothness between them. And you can probably tell from the silhouette that the silhouette isn't affected by it. The silhouette is still pointed, but on the surface, we have a fake version of that shading. I just think that's so cool. But you'll notice the menu down here now changed from Add UV Sphere to Shade Smooth, because the menu only shows the last thing you just did. So you'll actually have to remember that when you add an object, you gotta change the settings before you do anything else, or the settings will be gone. So let's delete this and add a new object by going to Add Mesh, and I'll add a cone for this, just to show you that if I right-click this cone and Shade Smooth, this does not react in the way we really want, because it tries to smooth out what is supposed to be sharp at the bottom here. Like this edge here is not supposed to be smoothed out, but it's still trying to smooth it out. And by the way, I'm drawing on screen by holding down D and clicking. It's not useful for you in any way, but it's very useful for me for teaching. So if you have an object that's supposed to have some smooth parts and some sharp parts, you right-click and you click Shade Auto Smooth instead, which will try to maintain those sharp parts of the object. So if you take anything away from this video, just remember, try to have as few polygons as possible to define the shapes. Let's talk about some other object types. I'll delete everything that's default, selecting it and pressing delete. And in the add menu here, you have a bunch of options. You have so many things that you can add, so let's try. First, I want to add an image because I have downloaded an image from online of a very sad looking dog that I really like, and I want to put it in my 3D scene. The way to put it in your 3D scene is not to import it as a reference, and it's not to import it as a background, it is to import it as a mesh plane. That'll give you a 3D object of the image. So I'll click that, which opens a file viewer, and I will go to the folder where I've downloaded this picture, click it, and click Import Images as Planes. And it's weird because the image looks gray, and it's gray on both sides, but that's, of course, because we are in the wrong viewport mode. We gotta go to Material Preview up in here, the third ball. And I'll just give you a little tip here. If this takes a long time to load, then chances are you haven't optimized the threads in your CPU. You need to increase the max shader compilation subprocesses. And I know that sounds like a Star Trek term. Like, Captain, what are the max shader compilation subprocesses at now? It is critical! But no, it basically means like, just Google your computer and Google the number of threads that your CPU has. and put that number in the Edit Preferences. Go to System, and here under Memory and Limits, the bottom one, Max Shader Compilation Subprocesses. My CPU has 12 threads, so I'll put that in there. And that just means that whenever I click the Material Preview button, it'll be 12 times as fast. Alright, this is a nice dog. I'll go to the Rotate tool and rotate it on the X-axis. And I'll hold down Control to snap it so that I can get it straight vertical. And if I want to take a picture of this, then I'll need a camera. And I deleted the initial camera that was here, so I'll just add a new one, going to Add Camera. And we can't see the camera because it's added in the middle, and we can see it's now behind the picture. So I'll go to the Move tool and move it over so that it can look at the picture. And do you remember how we look through the camera? We go to the camera button on the right to look through it. We click the tiny little arrow above it and go to View, Camera to View. And now when we move around, the camera will follow us. So we can reframe the photo of the dog to a worse framing than the original photographer had. And then I can click off Camera to View and move out of the camera. And now if I click the Render button and Render Image, it does render an image of the dog, but it's very dark. And the reason for that is we have not added a light yet. So let's go to the Add menu. And I keep going back to the Add menu, and you will, working in 3D, you'll go to the Add menu all the time, which is why it's very smart to learn the shortcut for it, and that is Shift A. A for Add. And that brings up the same menu just where your mouse is. So let's go to the light, and we have different lights to choose from. The most basic one, that's just a point light. So I'll click that. It's hard to see. You'll see it did show up in the outliner. We do have a point light, but it is in the center of the image. So I'll move it out here, and we can't really see the effect of the light, and that is because we're viewing our scene in Material Preview mode and not in Rendered mode, which doesn't take lighting into account. So let's go into Rendered mode, and now we can see it. Now we can make a nice looking vignette on our image, make it brighter in the center and not around the edge. And I'll go back to Render and press Render Image, which gives me a nice reframing and worse lighting on the photo of the dog that I downloaded. We have a text object that's going to be very useful for you as a graphic designer. The text object, you edit it by pressing Tab when you have it selected, and then you can write whatever you want. And you'll find all the settings for that text in its context menu down here in the properties. There's a letter A, and that gives you settings for things like you have the font here. You can change the regular bold and italic fonts. You'll just click on the little folder icon, which will open your folder view, and you'll navigate to the folder where you have that font stored. And you can go to geometry here, and if you increase extrude, then that'll make the object into 3D. So you have a bunch of different objects that you can add, but for the most part, the things we'll be adding are cameras, lights, and meshes, which are 3D objects. Hello, it's class project time. Class projects are not scary, for one. They are a way to embody what you learn. Because you probably know this already, but you do actually learn a lot better if you use what you learn and don't just watch it. There's something about doing it that makes it stick in your brain a little bit better. So that's why we have class projects. They are for you to learn it a little bit better, and also, as a bonus, you get something you can put in your portfolio right away. You'll find this document, which contains all the class projects, in the exercise files. So download those and follow along. If you haven't done so already, download Blender using this link and go to randomprojectgenerator.com to get your unique brief. I already did this. I got the industrial and edgy chili oil brand, but you go get your own one. I'll use this project for the rest of the course, and you use whatever project you get. Our first project, that's this, the collage project. You've been asked to make a 3D collage of images to show the aesthetic of the brand. Download a few suitable images from the web and arrange them in 3D, then render it out. The image will be used on social media. You can download free stock images from Unsplash or Pixabay. So what do I mean by collage? I'll show you what I did actually. So this is my submission for this project. This is Daniel's edgy and industrial chili oil brand. So I went online, I looked up a chili, I looked up some industrial things, and I found this great Brazilian graffiti that I used in the background. Now what I want you to practice here is putting things in 3D space and lighting them. So you'll see there's a little bit of shadow below all of these. That's because I have a light above it casting shadow. And you're also allowed to add text like I did, but that's definitely not a requirement. Speaking of requirements, there's only one. You have to use 3 or more images in the scene. As for deliverables, render your scene and export as a square PNG. That's to make it suitable for social media. And then when you're done, you upload it to the class project or assignment section on this website, the website where you're watching this video right now, and share it on your own social media. It's a good idea to share your work and show people how far you come in your 3D work. And if you want, you can tag at Bring Your Own Laptop on Instagram, and there's a link to the Facebook group and the LinkedIn group. So I'll give you a tip. This is something I did for this project, is to open 2 separate 3D windows and use one of the windows to look through the camera and the other window to move around the 3D scene. And that way you can adjust things in 3D and see in real time how it looks from the camera's point of view. I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with, but you won't get any critical feedback at this stage. I'm not interested in critiquing your layouts and colors and stuff. I really just want you to get used to moving things around in 3D, getting familiar with the Blender user interface. That's what the point of this project is. Materials. Let's talk more about materials. I went to File, New, General, and now I'm in a brand new file. I'll add a material to this box. That is down here in the Material tab. Remember, you won't see the Material tab if you have the camera selected or the light selected. You need a mesh selected. And then you have the Materials tab down here. And you can add a new material to the box. You change the color by clicking on the big field that is the color. Don't click on the little round icon. Click on the actual color, then you'll get a color picker, and I can make it red. The box doesn't become red right away because we're not in the right view mode. That is up here. We have to go to Material Preview, and then it becomes red. But it can be a little confusing to work with multiple materials. So let me just build up a scene here so you can see how to work with multiple materials. I'll delete the objects that I don't need. Move the box up a little bit, Shift A to add a mesh, and I'll add a plane. The plane is kind of tiny, and it's right below the cube, so I'll scale it out a bit using the Scale tool. And I'll click the blue square to scale it on the horizontal axes. Now I have a floor, and I'll add another object, Shift A, under Mesh. I'll add, let's do a cone. Click the Move tool and move it up here so we can see it on top of the floor. And let's add one more object, and I can do the torus. We haven't used a torus yet. Move that over here. So, right, if I have the torus selected, the material is gone, because the material only shows up here if I have the cube selected, the thing that has the material on it. But I can add the material to something else too. If I go to the torus, and I click the little drop-down menu next to New, and there's a list of all the materials in my scene. So I can click that material, and that applies it to that as well. And these two share the same material, as in whatever change I make to the material on either object will propagate to the other one as well. If I now click on the cube, and I change the color to blue, it changes the color to blue on the donut as well. And if I later want to unlink these, if I want to make them to separate materials, I gotta go to the material here, and there's the number 2. This signifies how many objects have this material applied to it. And if you just click that, that makes a duplicate material. Now if I click the drop-down menu, I have two materials, and one of them is on the cube, one of them is on the donut. And if I change the color of the one, then it doesn't change on the other. And to keep things organized, it's a good idea to rename your materials. And you can do that either by double-clicking here or clicking its name here. And this one can be called green. And this one can be called blue. And now again, if I go to the cone and I go to the drop-down and I give it the green material, those are now shared. So if I change it to red, it changes it on both objects. But color isn't the only setting you can change here. There are so many sliders to play with. These are the most important ones. You have even more in the rollouts down here, like a diffuse, you have subsurface. You can play with everything and see what it does. It's all fun to play with. I'll show you the most important ones. If I right-click on the cone and click Shade Auto Smooth, now it's smoothed out so we can tell that when I decrease the roughness, it becomes more shiny. And if I increase metallic, then it becomes a metal. Almost everything in life has an IOR of 1.5. This is index of refraction. You'll generally not want to touch this, but you can touch the alpha. When you decrease that, that adds transparency to the object. So go ahead, look through all the sliders, play with them, and see what kind of effects you can make. So far, we've only moved our object around, but we haven't changed the shape of the object. I mean, we have gone to the scale tool, and we've scaled it out on different axes, but that doesn't change the fact that this is still a cubic shape. It can never become a bottle if we do this. So that is where edit mode comes in. We use edit mode to change the fundamental shape of the object. This is how we start modeling things. Let's go up here to the top left where it says object mode, click that, and that brings up all the other modes. Don't worry about these. The only one we're interested in is edit mode. These other ones, those are for super niche uses, but edit mode will be going in and out of a million times over this course, which is why there is a very handy and very easy keyboard shortcut for it, and that is Tab. You press Tab and things change. We're now in edit mode. The object becomes orange, we get a bunch more tools on the left, and now we're no longer working with the object as a whole, we're working with individual points. So now if I click a point, I go to the well-known move tool, I move it up, that moves just that point. And this is what we do in edit mode. We change the shape of the object. And we can change the whole object at the same time if I press A on my keyboard. That selects everything. And I can scale, and I can scale it up. This is just as if I scaled it in object mode, right? No, it isn't. And this is a very key thing to understand, and it's so confusing. I'm sorry about this. I've been racking my brain trying to find out how to explain this, and I think I'll just show you the effect so you know what happens. Here's the deal. I'll undo everything, go back to the cube. And here, this is just a demonstration. Don't worry about the things I'm doing. I'll teach you how to do all of this later on. This is just to show you a concept. So I'll go to the bevel tool, I'll click an edge, and I will drag this gizmo to bevel that corner. This is what beveling does. It flattens out the corner and leaves a 45-degree face there instead. Now, if I go out of edit mode, I press Tab, I'm now in object mode. I move the whole object around. This is where we've done all our work up until now. And let's say I scale it on the blue axis, just up and down. I scale it up. This is no longer 45 degrees because I scaled it. And now I go back into edit mode, I press Tab, I select this corner, and I bevel that. It no longer bevels at a 45-degree angle. It actually bevels at the same angle this is. And why is this? The reason is, when I scaled it out in object mode, I didn't actually change the position of each point. I didn't. I just told the program, whatever shape the object is in, stretch it out across the top to bottom axis. It's as if you print a design onto a t-shirt and you stretch out the t-shirt. right? You haven't changed the design. You could go back into the computer, you could change the design, print it on a new t-shirt and stretch it out just the same, and now you would have a stretched version of your design. That is what's happening here. So in fact, what I did just do is I made a 45-degree cut on this edge, but then it's stretched out right afterwards. And we can see that that's happening here in the Object tab in the Properties panel. Here you can see all the transforms of the objects. It has no changes on location, no change in rotation, but in scale we have a 1, and a 2.159. That's the z-axis, that's up and down, right? That's what I changed. So if I drag this further, you'll see it stretches out further. And if I pull it back down, I can click it and type 1 so that they're all 1. Now we're back to a cubic shape, and that second cut I made is in fact 45 degrees. It always was. I always did a 45-degree angle cut, but the shape of the object was stretched afterwards. And don't worry if none of this makes sense. It's totally confusing. The only thing you really have to know is that when you work in edit mode on an object that is stretched out differently on different axes, things may start to behave a little bit weird. If you have scaled it out on just the top axis and then you go into edit mode and you try to make a bevel, for instance, it won't be 45 degrees like you think it will. But let's say you have made a shape that you've stretched out like this, you feel really bad now, but you didn't remember, you made a mistake, and you're like, I hope Robin doesn't see this. What can you do? Well, there is something you can do before I find out. So I'll put the object down here in the corner so that you can see it right next to its scale. So you'll see the scale is now 1, 1, and about 2.5. The object is stretched out, so that's what we can see. And if I go to Object, Apply, Scale, this is what I'll click. But I'll move the camera down there so you can see what's happening. Pay attention to the shape of the object and its scale values when I click this. Ready? The shape of the object didn't change, but its scale did. It now has a uniform scale. So what happened now was we applied the scale to the object. It maintains its shape, but the scale is uniform. So now this is the new default shape. And if I go into edit mode and I bevel any corner, it'll do so at a 45-degree angle exactly as expected. So when you're in doubt, when things start to behave weirdly, go to Object, Apply, Scale. Selecting things in edit mode can be a little bit tricky. So let's go into edit mode by either clicking Tab or this button here and go down to edit mode. And to start, let's do something that I know will excite you to no end, some glossary. This is a vertex or a point. This is an edge. And this is a face or a polygon. I'm really starting to wish I didn't write this out by hand and just chose a font instead. I typically switch a bit between the terminology. I might call it a vertex, I might call it a point. Now you know what it means, and we can interface with each type. Up here with the 3 buttons next to edit mode. This first one corresponds to vertices. If we click that, and now we can select different points or vertices, and we can say move them around separately. Second one is for edges, and I click that. Now we can select edges and move those around, moving 2 vertices at a time. We can not only move it, but we can also say rotate it. And scale it. Don't worry about non-uniform scaling when we're in edit mode. If you'll remember the scaling issues from last time, don't worry about scaling when we are in edit mode. And third one, that's the face selection. Now we can select whole faces and edit those. If you want to add to your selection, you can hold down the Shift key on your keyboard and click another face. That'll add them. And if you click one that's already selected, that will deselect it. One kind of confusing thing, if I go to the top tool here, which is the box select tool, let's say I want to select all 4 top vertices. I view it like this, I drag a box over it, and you'd think that it selects all of them, but the back one isn't selected because it wasn't visible. Blender only selects points that are visible to you. Meaning, if you want to select things that are on the back side of your object, you need to go into X-ray mode, which is one of the view modes up here, the leftmost ball, which is wireframe. You click that, now you can see through your object, and if you now drag that box, it'll select the back one as well. So remember, these are the fundamental building blocks of your object. You cannot make changes on a smaller scale than a vertex. You cannot take a point inside the middle of this face and drag it out, because there's nothing there. The face must always just be a face, an edge must always be a straight edge. So if we want to make changes that are smaller than a face, then we need to add more vertices to the object. And that's the start of modeling, which we will start in the next video. We've come to probably the most important part of the course, and that is modeling. Modeling is making 3D shapes, and it's beyond the things you find in the add menu, like, the cube and the cylinder. It is adding more details to an object, making your own custom objects, you can say. So in the next few videos, we'll be modeling a house, and by the end of it, you'll be able to model most objects. For real. So first off, we have to go into edit mode, which is up here where it now says object mode, and we can go down to edit mode, or we can press the shortcut tab. When we're in edit mode, the toolbar expands to show us all the modeling tools. And in fact, on my screen, the toolbar even goes outside of the screen. So if yours does that too, just move your cursor to the edge of that window and drag to resize it, and you'll get two columns like this. Now, these are the most common tools for modeling. They're not the only tools in Blender, but if you know how to use these tools, you can model 98% of all models. Like these are what you need, basically. And in fact, we'll even skip over some, because not all of them are that important. Let's just start at the start with the Extrude Region tool. So Extrude Region works best with faces. Now remember, we have different selection modes. Up here we have vertices, which are the corner points. We have edges, which are the lines connecting the corner points. And then we have the faces, which consist of 4 lines making up a plane. And when we have the Extrude Region tool selected, we get this. It's called a gizmo. It's a big plus sign. And if we click that and drag it, that drags out the face. But crucially, this is different from moving it, because it leaves the original geometry from the cube going across here. Had I, let's just press Ctrl or Command Z to undo that. Had I used the Move tool and moved it over, we would not have that line going through the mesh. So when you use Extrude, you add detail to the mesh. And that's important, because if we're going to make a house, then we need to pull up in the middle. So I will go to Edge Select mode to select this edge that I've made, and use the Move tool to move that up. Now I have a house shape. And if I had moved the face to begin with, I wouldn't have that mesh detail to work with. So this is what's crucial to understand about meshes in 3D. There is nothing for me here to click. I can move the whole face, but I cannot split it in two unless I have a line going there. So let's undo that, extrude this face, press the Edge Select mode, the Move tool, and click this edge and move it up. That gives me the base of a house shape. Let's add a window to this house. When I want to add a window, I face the same challenge as with the roof. If I go to the Face Select mode, I click this face, and I want to say extrude it inward, I have to do the whole face at a time. And yes, the Extrude tool does work inward on a mesh as well. But I have to do the whole wall. I guess that's common in modern architecture, but this is a classic house, so I want to do a little detail in the middle. And that's where the next tool, Inset, comes in. I click that, which gives me a yellow circle. That's the gizmo for this tool. And if I click it and I drag, that moves the face in on itself. And it creates a little face in the middle of the larger face. Not only that, but it connects every corner to the outside corners. Now, in time, you'll get a sense for why Blender does this. To summarize it, every point has to be connected to another point using a line and using a face. And so had we just had floating points in here, that would be an incomprehensible mesh for Blender. And that's why it added these corner lines for us as well. Now, okay, I've inset this face. I released it a little bit too early, so my window is a little bit too big. But remember, whenever you've used a tool or a function in Blender, you get a little menu down in the corner, which lets you refine what you just did. So if I pop that open, I can change all the settings for that inset. And it does have quite a lot of settings, and you'll be using these later in modeling. But for now, let me just change the thickness by dragging this slider. And that lets me redo the size of the window. Let's shrink it down to a more window size. And then I'll collapse the menu so I don't obstruct my shortcuts. Okay, the window has a weird shape. It has the shape of the wall. So I need to move this point downward. To get to move only a point, I can't do it in face select mode. I can't even do it in edge select mode because that would require me to move the whole edge, but I can do it in vertex select mode. So I'll click vertices, I'll click that corner, and I can move it down individually. And now that I have a nice shape for my window, I can extrude this face inward to get thickness to it. So we'll go to face select mode, select the face in the middle, and using the extrude tool, I'll extrude it in a little bit. Nice! And I can use this same technique to make, say, a chimney. We can go up here, select this face, and inset it to a chimney size, and then extrude that. Now it does extrude diagonally, making the house look like it's from Alice in Wonderland. And, well, I'm in a boring mood today, so I want a more realistic chimney. If something like this happens, then remember, you can use the tool to add geometry without moving it. Let's undo this. Let's drag it up, open the menu, and look at what the options are here. I can, in fact, reset all the movement axes. If I take this bottom one, I set it to 0, and that moves it back down to where it started, but there is still that extra geometry there. It is extruded, but imagine it was extruded and then moved back, so it's perfectly overlapping with where it started. Well, now I can go to the Move tool and move it straight up. And that gives me a little more control over where it goes. I can also flatten this top. It's worth actually trying to figure out yourself how you would flatten this out. What would you do? There are a couple of ways, right? You could go into Edge Select mode, press the bottom or the top one, and then move it so it's flat. That's perfectly reasonable. It would be kind of hard to get it right at that point where it's level, so maybe not. Maybe you would instead use the Rotate tool, right? You'd go into Face Select mode, click the middle face, then rotate it so it's flat. But now it's very subtle, but you may have seen the whole chimney kind of expanding at the top. When I did that, it changes the thickness at the top, which is again not entirely correct. So in fact, in this case, I would use the Scale tool. I would scale this face alone down on the blue axis, which flattens it. And I'll have to refine that in the settings below. So the scale of 1 means to do nothing. So the X and Y are both on 1, and on Z, I want a scale of 0, which makes it completely flat. And I can keep refining this chimney by, say, insetting it a little bit, give it a thickness, and then extrude that metal down. Nice! The next tool is Bevel. Bevel is the example I used in a previous video. It cuts a corner and makes it flat. So if I go up to my Edge Select mode, so that I can click the corners around my roof, I'll click that, giving me this stick gizmo, and when I pull that out, that flattens it. It flattens that corner out. The only thing I'd be wary of when using the bevel tool is how many edges you bevel at the same time. All of these tools work even if you have more elements selected. So if I undo that, I can select this edge, this edge, this edge, and the back edges, and I can bevel everything at the same time. Had I done them one at a time, let's undo that. Had I done this first, and then this, you see I get a strange looking corner over here. So this is something to pay attention to when you're beveling. Oftentimes, you'll want to bevel large sections at a time. So let's do the whole roof in one fell bevel. Next, let's add a door, because a door poses another new challenge, I know, right? What a coincidence, the house makes me have to use all the tools that I want to teach you in this video. Let's try to do the same thing as with a window, just so I can show you that it's not gonna work. So I'll click this face, I'll inset it, and then you might think, okay, well maybe I can just move this down to the ground to be more like a door. So I'll move it down, but once this face, this little face, goes past its containing larger face, it starts to bug out. This is not an acceptable mesh. This will confuse Blender to no end, because like, in a way this face is within this other face, but in this area it's outside. Like this is no bueno. Not allowed. Don't move things outside their containing faces. And don't worry about moving it in and out like this. It'll still connect correctly to everything else. This is what's not allowed. Okay, so let's undo everything. What am I trying to do here? I'm trying to make a shape that's like this. I need to add a line that goes like this, I need to add a line that goes like this, and I need to add a line that goes like that. And for that, the next tool is great. This is the loop cut. When I click that and move around my mesh, Blender will try to draw lines around my object. That's when I hover over another edge. It'll kind of draw a line going across that edge and all the way around the model. If I click now, that edge is now cut into the mesh and I have more detail to work with. If I like what I just did, then I can go to the Move tool, select only these top faces by holding Shift and clicking each one and moving them up. And now I can change like the profile of my roof, right? Well, in this particular case, I just undid that with Controller Command Z. I can add a loop cut going across the whole house. Here. This is that top line on my door. It's skewed, which is not great, and can be fixed by scaling on 0 again. Remember, if I go to the Scale tool, I can kind of flatten everything. Let's go into wireframe view, so I can look through the whole house and see that the loop is jagged because it's trying to stay in the middle of every single line going across. But if I scale it on the blue axis, I can either increase that jaggedness or decrease it by going close to 0. And it's hard to get exactly 0 by using the gizmo, so I'll go down to the menu and type in 0 manually on the Z. That completely flattens out that line, allowing me to move it up and down where I feel like the top of my door should be. And now I can start adding more loop cuts going across like this way. So I'll click here to add one vertical loop, and let's move that over. But oh no, I start breaking everything I've already made on my model. How can I move this line over without breaking everything? Aha, that's the next tool I want to show you. Let's, in fact, I'll skip over a few for now and go down here to Edge Slide. Edge Slide lets me move edges without changing the shape of my object. When I click the gizmo and I drag it, you'll see the edge moves across the faces on which it's attached. So I'm not moving the points farther than they can really go, and I can move them over to the side here. I can go back to the loop cut tool and add another loop going here. And in fact, I think this is in the right spot, but if it's not, I can go back to the edge slide tool and move it to where I want it. And now I have the detail necessary to make a door. I'll go back to face select mode, and you know what? You'll go up here a million times while modeling, so it pays to learn the shortcuts for these selection modes. And those are simply 1, 2, and 3. That cycles through them. So I'll press 3 for face selections, go to my Extrude Region tool, click on the door, and using that Extrude Region tool, I'll move it in a little bit. So that's it for making a door with a loop cut tool. Okay, let's get weird. The next tool I want to show you is the knife tool, this one. The knife tool is similar to the loop cut tool, except it doesn't constrain you at all. The loop cut tool goes all the way through your model no matter what, but the knife tool lets you cut anywhere you want. You can cut from here to here to here to here, and crossing itself, and you can really start to screw up your mesh. When you're done, by the way, you press return. How do I know that? Well, when you have a tool active, you can see all the shortcuts you can press to change how it works down at the very bottom of the program. You'll see left mouse is cut. Over there to the right, you have stop with right click. Some of these can be handy at some points, but you'll also see return to confirm. And now I have a bunch of ugly lines going across my house if I want to make some weird modern art. But in fact, I just want to use it to make a heart. So let's draw a heart here on the roof. Remember, there are no bent lines in 3D. Everything is straight. So if you want to add the illusion of curves, you're going to have to add a bunch of points. So I'm just clicking for every single point, trying to make... I think this is probably the most beautiful heart I've ever drawn in 3D. And when I'm done, I'll press return. Again, it added a couple of lines going across to the edges here. That's just because Blender has to do that because it can't have a floating face inside another face. And now I can go to face select mode, select this new face that I've made, and that is a heart shape, and extrude it. Gorgeous, but uh-oh. I forgot I wanted the heart to go inwards, not outwards. How can I fix it? Everyone viewing asks. Well, if you go to the move tool, you can start to move it, but it's a little tricky. Like you can move it downward and now it's skewed a little bit, so I'll move it over. But how do I know it's exactly right? Well, you can know if you use the shrink/fatten tool. Shrink and fatten does what it says on the tin. It fattens things up. If I use it on my whole house, let me just press A on my keyboard, which does the same as going to select all, selects all, and I drag this gizmo, well, I can fatten up my house, or I can shrink it, which makes it look very strange indeed. What it's doing is it's moving every single face along its own facing axis. What does that mean? Well, for the heart, it is facing this way, the exact way that the stick is pointing. And when I drag the stick, it'll move that heart across that exact axis, allowing me to move it into the house instead of outward. Had I done it to this face, then it would move straight out from the ceiling. This face moves straight to the right or to the left, depending on if you shrink or fatten. Cool, the final tool I want to show you is the shear tool. The shear tool has the weirdest looking gizmo of them all. Let's just prepare to use it here. I'll go to my move tool and select all these back faces by holding shift while selecting each face. I'll move it out a little bit. And I'll show you that what the shear tool does is you can kind of skew the whole thing. So if I press this little line and I drag it to the left, that slopes it. And you can skew in any which direction. If you want to skew it to the side, like this, it can make some weird results. If I select everything by pressing A, I can make an Alice in Wonderland house by, say, skewing it a bit to the left or the right. Skewing it over. You can make some very strange shapes with this. Okay, so these are the main modeling tools in Blender. These are the ones you'll be going back to over and over and over again, and it's fine not to remember what all of them do right away. I'm kind of just
shoving all this information into your brain at the same time. And, I know it's a lot. I know. But we will be going back to these over and over again. And I think that when you watch me use them, your brain kind of implicitly learns how to think about moving 3D meshes. Like how to add detail where you need it, and how these tools can be used to make the shapes that you want. So I just kind of want to plant the seed of each tool in your brain, and we'll be coming back to these over and over again. And so mostly as an excuse to repeat each one, I want to show you the shortcut for them. It really does help to learn the shortcut for each tool if you're going to be using them a lot. And as a quick reminder, there is a shortcut cheat sheet in the class exercise files, which I would recommend you print out, have in your desk. And if you just get that into your muscle memory, you'll be so much quicker at modeling. So first, selection modes. The 3 buttons up here, those are 1, 2, 3. And remember, everything I press shows up on the bottom left there. 1 lets you select individual points. 2 lets you select edges that connect the points. 3 lets you select faces. To extrude something, the shortcut for that is E on the keyboard. When you press E, the new extrusion will be attached to your cursor. So when I move it, I'm not holding anything down, I'm just moving it. It'll stick to my cursor, and I can confirm my movement by left-clicking. Inset, that is I. If I press I, and I move my cursor, that'll inset it. I can left-click to confirm that. Beveling, let's add some details to this chimney. I'll go to Edge Select mode by pressing 2. I'll select each corner going around, and I'll make it into a sci-fi chimney. Beveling is Control or Command B. B for Bravo. And I'm moving my cursor outward, and that bevels the corners. I'll left-click to confirm it. Loop cuts, those are Control or Command R. I think R for ring? That's my best guess. And hey, notice that it's not going across the whole mesh when I have it here. It does so some places, but not all. What gives? I'll get back to that in just a second, but first let's just, click there, I guess. And now Blender actually moves automatically to the Edge Slide tool. That is to speed up your workflow. So if I move my cursor, that new edge slides up and down. Usually though, I want to cut right in the middle, so I will cancel the sliding with right click. So, okay. Looking at my house, you'll see that almost all the faces have 4 corners. This face here has 1, 2, 3, 4. This face here has 4 corners. This one, 4 corners, 4 corners, 4 corners. A couple have fewer. These have 3. All these here have 3 corners. And over here we have some monster faces, which have, I don't know how many corners. Like there's one here, there's one here. I think like 20. It's gotta be like 20 corners. These faces have special names because we are scared of them and we want to know our enemy. So these are simply known as triangles. The 4-sided faces, those are polygons. And any face that has more than 4 sides, that is called an n-gon. I'm sorry about the jargon, okay? I didn't make up these names. An n-gon, that is our worst enemy. You very, very rarely want to see an n-gon on your mesh because they are hard to work with. Why is it called an n-gon? It basically comes from algebra, where n is the substitute of any number, right? So it's basically a whatever number gon. And that is gon as in pentagon, hexagon, meaning a 2D shape. So an n-gon, that's a face with more than 4 sides, and they make it hard to model. Because if I use the loop cut tool with Ctrl R, Blender knows to draw a line through every single 4-sided polygon, but it stops when it comes to an n-gon. It has no idea what to do. And with triangles, similar things happen. If I want to cut an edge loop through this triangle, it also, it doesn't quite work. Like in this area, the mesh is a lot harder to work with now. But, triangles are kinda bad, but you can't completely avoid them. Sometimes you'll just get them. But n-gons,
Stay away from n-gons as much as you can. Let's talk about deleting stuff. Deleting stuff is something where I feel like it should be easier than it really is. Because you'd think you just press delete on the keyboard, right? And you can. Let me show you. I go into edit mode by pressing tab. And now I can edit this house that I made in a previous video. And say I no longer want the heart. The heart is a bit too much to have on a house. And so, okay, I go to my vertex selection mode. And I just drag a box around that heart. Remember, it doesn't select anything that is behind a wall, so I have to go and check that. Oh, it didn't quite see this vertex, so I'll hold down Shift and press that. And now I have every vertex selected. Now let's just press delete, eh? Okay, it brings up a menu. It asks, what do I want to delete? You might think this is a bit redundant since I have vertices selected, and I guess it is, but let's click vertices. Okay, I have a hole in my roof now. Now, sometimes you want a hole. Maybe you want a hole for the window, yeah? So I'll go to face select, hold shift while selecting all these faces, press delete, and in this case, let's delete faces. Okay, that's a hole into the house, which is fine, but I don't want a hole in the roof. So how do I reconnect this? How do I build this up again? As in all programs, there are a myriad of ways to do this, but the easiest one is to bridge loops. Here's a quick example just on the side to explain what I'm talking about. Think of it like making a bridge. If I go to my edge selection mode, and I press this edge and I press this edge, I just want to make a bridge between them. And the bridge loop function is not found here, it's under the extra tools, which you find across the top bar here. They are the mesh, vertex, edge, and face menus. These contain all the modeling tools that you can ever want, and this one, since we're working with edges at the moment, is under edge. And it's the third one from the top, bridge edge loops. When I click that, they're bridged. It creates a new face between them. And this is what we want to do with our house. So going back here, which edges do we want to bridge? Select any edges that are on the opposite sides of each other. So either this and this, or this and this. Go up to edge mode and bridge edge loops, and fills in the face. You can also kind of skip this step if you delete the right way, because there is another way of deleting that I'll show you by deleting. Let's see, what do we want to delete? Let's delete the chimney. I will again go to vertex selection and drag a box over that. That doesn't select everything, and instead of going around and manually doing that, I'll go into wireframe view and I'll select it using wireframe. And since I can now see through it, I can also select through it. So back in solid mode, when I press delete, I get another option. I don't have to delete, I can dissolve. When I dissolve vertices, it'll try to delete them and then reconnect automatically. So let's click that. Fantastic, it did it. It deleted everything I had selected and then it filled in the face. But there is something terribly, terribly wrong here. Do you see it? We have created an n-gon. Don't believe me? This face here, how many points does it have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Terrible. Okay, but don't worry about it. This is easily fixed using the knife tool. I'll go over here to knife, and all we need to do is to see, oh, I have a line going straight across here, and then it terminates, and then it kind of continues on the other side. Let's just connect that. Let's click this point, drag it over, and click this point as well. Press return to confirm that, and do the same down here. Click, click, confirm. Now I've turned my n-gon into 3 four-sided faces. This is the kind of mesh management that you kind of have to get used to when working in 3D, especially if you want to keep working on this, because the n-gon, again, is going to make stuff difficult. It's not really obvious how you model round things. Like, you now know how to make, like, cubic shapes and stuff, but I want to equip you to be able to model a round bottle, because, shock surprise, you're gonna need it quite soon for a project. let's just look at some of the challenges that will arise when you want to model a round thing. The first one is that the cube is not a good starting point. You can start with a cube, you can start with anything, really, but you'll save time by starting with an object that kind of looks like the thing that you want to make. And so let's just delete everything that's here already, and I'll press Shift-A to add something new, and under the Mesh menu, I'll choose a cylinder, which is much closer to a bottle. Now let's go into edit mode by pressing Tab. And okay, one thing that's pretty common with bottles is that at the bottom, they have a little divot that goes up like this. So let's see how we could make that. Well, I'll press 3 on my keyboard to go into face selection mode. Also up here, I'll select the bottommost face. And do you remember what the tool was for adding details within a face? It's the inset tool. So if I expand this here, you'll find the inset tool right here. And so let's just inset this to about halfway. That gives us another face within the face, right? We can use the move tool to move it up a little bit. And what's wrong here? Well, it's very sharp. And how do we add roundness to sharp corners? What tool is that? That's the bevel tool. This one here, bevel. So let's start by beveling. Yeah, let's start by beveling this sharp corner here. And so we have to go into edge select mode to select the edge and hold down Shift to select all the edges. Now, this is tedious, going around like this to select all the edges. There are a couple of other ways to do it. One of them that you might think of is to go into wireframe view, like here, and then go into point selection mode and drag a box over all the bottom vertices, and then go into edge select mode. That will indeed select all of them. Another way to do it is to hold down Alt or Option while clicking on an edge. That will select what's called an edge loop. And a loop is just this. It's like a line of edges going around. That's the loop. So now we can bevel this. And maybe we'll want to add more segments, and that's in this little menu here. So we'll increase the segment amount to make it smoother. And then close that again. That looks more like the bottom of a real bottle. And we can do the same with this. In fact, if I go into face select mode, select the middle face, I can bevel this, and it will bevel everything around it. So I can increase this until it fills almost the entire bottom of the bottle, and add a couple of segments to that, which will round off the entire bottom. If I go into X-ray view, you can see that this is now the shape of the underside. Another common thing is you will want to add like a profile, maybe a little indent for holding it properly. And what you can do then is you can add more extrusions, extrude, 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 and using again the loop select mode, now we want to select a loop of faces, all of these here. So again, we can go into wireframe view, and just to make sure that we're right on the level, we can even click one of the axes here on the trackball to go into a straight side view and select all of these faces here. Go back into solid mode, and how do we move all these inwards to make a little indent? Because if you try to move them in any direction, you can make it like an S shape, which you might want to do. It's pretty cool. It's a cool effect. Control Z to undo that. But how do you move all of them inwards? You do that by scaling, which might seem a little counterintuitive, but I think you'll understand it when you see it. If I scale all of these inwards now, towards the center, that creates the indent that we want. We can also scale it outwards to make like a bulge. What if we want a sharper indent? You might want to have a solid little seam line or something going around. Let's add that here. Well, first we need to add a loop that we can use. And we add loops with the loop cut tool. You can click here. And then here's a really clever trick for just adding thickness to this loop. We can now go to bevel, and if we bevel this loop, watch this. It's like it expands the loop outwards. So now we've added a ring of faces. Super handy trick. And what I want to do with these is I want to extrude them inwards. Or you can extrude them outwards. We go to Extrude Region, and we drag it, but it doesn't work. These extrude this way, these extrude the same way, and again we get the weird S shape, but now much sharper. Let's undo that, Control or Command Z. There are a couple of ways around this. One that you might think of is to extrude, and then in the settings, just extrude them by 0. So now they are extruded, but they haven't moved at all. So we just added geometry that's now in the same space as it already was, and we can go to Scale. And if we scale those extruded faces inwards, now we have this sharp seam that we wanted. However, this is such a common thing to do that there already is a tool designed for it. So let's undo this, and you'll see the Extrude tool has a little arrow on the bottom right, and that signifies that there are variations of this tool. And if we hold down on this tool, we get other ways of extruding. For example, we have Extrude Individual, right? If we do Extrude Individual, they will not be connected, and we get this kind of gear-like shape, which is pretty cool. The one we want to use now is called Extrude Along Normals. Wait, what does that mean? Extrude along normals. What's normal about this? Well, I am so sorry to have to tell you this, but normal in 3D doesn't have the normal meaning of normal. In 3D, normal, it means outward, which is it's a strange word. Don't ask me why they use that word to mean outward, but it's a useful concept in 3D. We will come back to it later in the course as well when we start shading glass. Normals are very important to understand in 3D, and they mean outwards from the mesh. So whatever direction is outward. And if we use this, extrude along normals, meaning extrude outward, and we drag, every face is going to look at what direction am I facing and extrude that way. So those are some tricks for modeling round things. I think you're equipped now to start modeling bottles. Just to summarize, we start with a cylinder. We used insetting to add detail on the top and bottom flat faces. We learned to select loops by holding down Alt and clicking on something, either clicking on an edge or a face. Remember to click on the edge that you want along the loop. If I click this edge, then it's going to select a loop in the other direction. And we learned to extrude along normal to extrude everything outward or inward. All right, class project 2, the bottle. This is my favorite one. It's like the core project for this course. Like this project here, this is the reason that all the brands are bottle related. So we're all making a bottle, and it's important not to skip this one because later projects will build on this one. So it's a core project. Let's read it. You've been asked to design a custom bottle for the brand. Your job is to model the bottle and its cap, choosing a distinct style that fits the brand's identity. Remember that on the random project generator, you got a product and you got like a brand identity, a style for it. Focus on exploring shapes to make a unique bottle for your brand. And I use the word bottle, but it doesn't technically have to be a bottle. Like you can make a soda can if you want, and it doesn't have to be glass, although a glass bottle can be super beautiful. But you can also make like plastic. You can make it out of metal. Feel free to experiment. Make something weird. If you want, you can make it look like laundry detergent. Although now that I said that, everyone's gonna do it, so don't do that. Anyway, so the requirements are model a bottle and its cap. Again, you don't have to have a cap specifically. I really put it there just to remind you to put a cap on it if it should have one. But it can be a tab, it can be a cork, whatever fits your container of choice. And keep the polygon count reasonably low. What do I mean by reasonably low? I mean something like this. Try not to make your polygons much smaller than this. The rule is as few polygons as you can get away with and still define the shape. And you will thank me for this, because it's much easier to work with a model that has few polygons than one that has many. And it's not a requirement, but it's a good idea to go online and look for some reference before you start modeling. I mean, like, just looking up models for similar products, looking up a reference for the style of the brand. It really helps when you're in there making concrete shapes to have some reference on the side. The deliverables. Screenshot your finished model both in solid view and wireframe view. What I mean here is wireframe view. I pressed wireframe and I turned off this toggle X-ray. When X-ray is on, you can see through the model and it's kind of hard to evaluate how big the polygons are. If you turn that off, then you can show off your hard work and you can show us, this is called the edge flow of the object. So screenshot this and put it in the project section on this website, and also go to solid view and screenshot this. And don't forget to show it in the best light. You can right click and press Shade Auto Smooth, and that'll smooth out your polygons. And you're very welcome to post it on social media and tag at Bring Your Own Laptop on Instagram, or post it on the Facebook group here or the LinkedIn group here. That's funny. Like, it brings up a little picture of Dan looking macho. So in the next video, I'll do this project for myself, but I do encourage you to model your model before watching that, because I've taken this kind of course myself, and I promise, if you do the thing yourself first, you'll have a much better appreciation of all the little things that I do. Like, when you've stumbled over something that is hard to solve, you will really remember it once you see the solution to it. And it may spark new ideas where you can go back and do the project over again and do an even better job. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys make. And now I'm gonna go make my own. I have a killer idea for it. I think you're gonna like it. I'll see you in the next video. When I went to the random project generator, I got an industrial and edgy chili oil brand. So what I did is I went online and I looked up some oil bottles. And the one on the right here does stand out a little bit, because I thought, hey, it's industrial and it's kind of edgy. So wouldn't it be fun to put the chili oil in something resembling this kind of mechanic oil can? To me, it fits really well with the chili oil, because it feels like, oh, it's kind of too dangerous to put in a regular can. It needs to be this industrial looking thing. And I also really like the shapes of these other ones, and I'll pull some inspiration from those as I model and texture my bottle as well. It's a good idea to find references like this that inspire you. So I'll move those over to the side, and I can still see them, and they'll inform my modeling. So let's start with a clean canvas. Let's just select everything and press delete to delete everything, and Shift A. Let's start off with a cylinder. Now we have to make a decision at the start here. How many polygons do we need around this cylinder? Remember, if I pop open this menu here, right after I've added the cylinder, I can add more vertices, or fewer. So let's do 64. Now let's press Tab right away to get into edit mode and start defining the shape. So looking at my reference, looking at this oil can on the right, this is my main inspiration. So let's try to replicate these kinds of proportions. So I'll pop over to the toolbar and move it out a little bit so I can see everything all at once, and go to the scale tool. Let's scale everything out on the blue plane, meaning in both the horizontal directions, until I get some proportions that I'm happy with. Something like this. And let's start at the bottom and work our way up. So at the bottom, I want there to be a little divot that looks like this. Because I feel like all bottles kind of have this. I don't know why. I think probably it's so that they overcompensate, so it absolutely doesn't go like this and starts wobbling. But there's probably some international regulation that I'm not aware of. Let's do an inset, and I'll inset these faces according to the international non-wobble regulation law to 0.64 meters, which is what the UN specifies, and move it up. When I move it up, it's a good idea to go into wireframe view so that I can see exactly how far up it goes. I feel like something like that. Maybe even shrink it down a little bit. Yeah, that's good. Remember, you will see this because this will be glass.
So you have to, or I, making something in glass, have to pay attention to how it looks inside as well. So I'll round off this edge here by going to Edge Select Mode and Alt or Option clicking on this ring, which selects the whole thing, and going to Bevel and pulling down to bevel this. And again, I'll pop up this little menu on the left to specify exactly how much and how many segments I want. So let's click on segments to add a couple. How many do I need? Let's stick to as few as possible, probably something like this. And I'll drag this slider to adjust the width. And if I hold down Shift, then it'll be even slower, so it's easier to really refine. And I feel like the size of the bevels really helps define how big the glass looks. Do you know what I'm saying? Because if you're making like tiny little bottles, the bevels will be huge compared to the bottle and vice versa, right? So it's a good idea to really get in your mind, how big is this thing? And I feel like in my mind, the size of the bottle is something like this makes sense. And then let's do the same thing with the inner face. So let's select faces, select this, and bevel it all the way to basically just round out the whole thing by adding more segments. And you can even see in wireframe view, when I had nothing, it was just sharp. And then when I start adding segments, it rounds it off. Great, that's the bottom taken care of. And let's also add an inset on the top. To where the cap will be in my case, and move that up a little bit to make a little trapeze. That's not a trapeze. I really like, looking on this reference, how flat it is. That looks really industrial to me. So let's keep it quite flat, although that will hinder pouring. And let's extrude that up again, and then round out, pressing 2 to select edges, and Alt or Option clicking these, and then beveling that. Again, adding a couple of segments. Let's see, let's keep it quite similar to this down here. Something like this, and do the same here. Maybe a little bit more. Still want it to look like glass, not metal. Good, okay. And one thing I really like in my reference is this kind of lip going around here. This looks industrial to me, so let's try to replicate that. I need more detail here, going around like here. So I'll have to add a loop. And I do that with the loop cut tool. Move over here until I get a yellow and click. And then I can move that up and down. In fact, it's probably better to slide it instead of moving these, because while in this case it doesn't really make a difference, sliding is a good habit to get into to maintain the shape of your bottle no matter what it looks like after you've added the loop. So then move that up here, and this is the trick that I really like for adding stripe details. Beveling that on a flat plane just gives a loop of faces. And I'll have to extrude those along their normals, meaning outward. And then I can select this loop by holding Alt or Option and clicking it. And then if I additionally hold down Shift, so I'm holding down both Shift and Alt on my keyboard, I can add another loop to it. Let those go, move around, hold them down again, and add these two loops. And now I can bevel them all in one fell swoop. Make sure not to overdo it. Like you can make these move past each other and really break your mesh real fast. One way to stop yourself from doing that is you can release, and in this menu you can press clamp overlap, and then it won't allow you to go too far. So let's add a couple of segments. And that looks good to me. Let's go out of edit mode by pressing tab. And that's a good base. Now I do want to add a cap, and I want to do that as a separate object. In 3D, it's a good idea to keep your objects separate if they would be separate in real life. So the cap is technically removable, so let's also make it a separate object in here. Shift A, add a new object, a new mesh cylinder, keep it on 64, same number of vertices as the base. And let's move that up here. Go into edit mode, 3 to select faces, top 1, and using the move tool, I'll move it down until the cap covers the glass. I'll take the bottom and move that up a little bit too. And in fact, I'll press A to select everything, and then using scale, I'll scale everything inward a little bit, looking at it from below, holding down shift to do it more sensitively, to define kind of the thickness of the cap. It's just a plastic cap, so let's keep it fairly thin. And then remember, this is going to be glass, so it's a good idea to work on the inside as well. I'll have to add more details here. So let's inset until the cap meets the glass. And then looking at it through wireframe mode, I can extrude that upward, making it hollow. In fact, if I go up to the outliner here, I can turn off the first object that I made by clicking the little eye, and I can work on this alone and see that it is in fact hollow. Let's turn that back on for context, and I'll go back into edit mode by pressing tab, and let's add the nozzle. So I'll shrink this in, got another face in the middle of it, and how big should the nozzle be? My main reference for that will be this. I want to kind of replicate this kind of thing. So I can see that it does taper in a little bit, but I want to see how big is it at the base. And I think for mine, that's equivalent to maybe something a little bit bigger than this. Maybe here. And then extrude it up. How far do I want to go? How far? Let's scale it in a little bit. Scale. And not out like that, but in. Just a tiny little bit to give that oil bottle feeling. Let's make it longer. I feel like it should be a bit longer. Yeah, like that. And this should also have some thickness. So let's inset that. And how thick is plastic? That's an insane question to ask. How thick is plastic? Let's extrude that down as well. And look at it through wireframe mode. And move the new face all the way down here. And in fact, this is a very common challenge in 3D that I'll show you how to deal with. Like, for me, it doesn't really matter what happens in here. This is going to be opaque plastic anyway. But I want to show you this because this is a challenge that you may have faced in your model. And that is, let's say I have a hole here that I want to connect to this hole. I want this to be, well, like the cap would be. I want this to be a donut with a hole here going all the way up. How do I do that? Well, first off, I need to add a new face inside this one, and I want that to be kind of the same size as the one above, but it doesn't really matter how big, but I'll go into wireframe mode so I can see a little bit better, and then I'll inset this until it's more or less the same size. Not exactly, this is fine. And then I'll delete this face, pressing delete, and then delete faces. I told you never to do this, but it's fine. We're going to connect them again in just a moment. And let's do the same with this face. I'll delete that too. Delete faces. So now I have two open loops. I have holding Alt to select this loop, and holding Alt-Shift to select this loop. I have both these loops, and I want to connect them. Looking at it in wireframe mode, this is what it looks like now. They're both open. And I can connect them using bridge edge loops. Pressing that connects them. And now, in fact, this top loop is superfluous. It's not really doing anything to define the shape, and I don't really need it. if I press delete on that, and I decide to dissolve those edges, dissolving means deleting and then reconnecting what's left, right? If I just delete edges, that'll leave a huge stinking hole. And if I press delete and then dissolve edges, that'll reconnect both sides of it. So now we have the hole going all the way through and then reconnecting at the bottom. And I can start to adjust the sizes now. So if I want to Alt or Option click this loop here, and I can move it up using wireframe mode to a good spot, somewhere around there, and then do the same thing with the outer loop. Something like this. And now let's add a little bit of a handle. Everything feels so symmetrical, like everything here is perfectly symmetrical, and I think it's really nice to add some asymmetry to a design. So let's go here and select a couple of faces here and pull out a little bit of a handle. That'll look something like this. So what I'll need another loop. So go in here and add a loop right there, and then slide those upward. How thick do I want this base to be? Something like that. And then using face select mode, I'll try to select like the middle ones. How do I know what the middle ones are? Let's just try those two. Are those in the middle? Well, let's click the Z on this trackball here, and I can actually see everything straight from the top. When I press wireframe now, I can see the x-axis running straight through here, and I can see that I didn't actually select the middle ones. I have to go one to the left. So these are the middle ones. And maybe I want one more on each side, like that. So let's extrude those out. And the end is now bent. It has the curve coming from here, and I don't want that, so let's scale those down on X, scale them down, and I want it to be completely flat, not just almost completely flat. So let's go into this menu and make sure that that scale is not 0.1, it's 0. But in this case, I want it to have like a 45-degree angle looking like this, and I can specify that I actually want an offset of exactly 1, which will give that 45-degree angle. And then I can extrude, let's extrude it out. And since I don't want it to go out, I'll extrude it by 0 and just move it down. And then I can scale that final face on 0 on the Z-axis. Make sure that's actually 0. That's the shape I want. So let's move that down a little bit more. Maybe I want you to be able to fit your finger under here. So maybe I'll go out of edit mode, just into object mode, and move the whole thing up a little bit. Yeah, like that. Go into tab and alt click on this edge to select the whole loop, and I'll bevel this to add like a 45-degree angle. I feel like it's a bit too thick, isn't it? Let's thin it up. I'll select these faces and move those over here, and maybe just select these edges and move those up. And these here should move over. That's better. And now, with like the general shapes blocked out, I can start smoothing things. So the biggest candidates for smoothing are gonna be this loop and this loop, for sure. So I'll bevel those, going quite far. Rounding it out quite a bit, I feel like. Unless I want to keep that. Maybe I want to keep that like 45-degree angle. Maybe just a little bit, like something like that. And then smoothing out the intersection between the handle, and the rest of the cap. That's going to be key. Like in 3D, all edges are completely sharp. In real life, no edges are completely sharp. So feel free to just round out everything. That will make it more realistic. So now let's select this loop and this one and this one. No, not that, but this. And just go over everything, every corner. Everything needs to be beveled. And also, let's just keep it going. Let's just go all the way around. Select that, select that. All of this can be beveled all at once. And finally, this one. I think that's all. And then bevel it. Let's turn on clamp overlap so I don't make any mistakes without seeing them. And then add a couple of segments. Not too many. I feel like that's probably enough. And I'll bevel this. The plastic can have a little smaller bevels than the glass, I feel like. And let's bevel this and this. And the top as well. The top should also be beveled. Everything gets a bevel. And to finish it off, a little bit of a cap. So I'll Shift A, add another cylinder. Remember, separate object in real life means separate object in 3D. Move it up here, tab, and scale everything in. And how do I want to do this? Maybe actually, I'll go to this object again, and I'll add a little bit of a lip here too. This is a good candidate for edge slide. If I now just start moving this up, I start changing the shape of the nozzle. But if I loop slide it, then it's going to move along the edges. Up here, add a bit of a bevel. A little bit. Extrude it along normals. Select all these edges to round them out. You can see I'm only using the same few tools. All the same tools over and over again. If you get used to these tools, this is what you use to model everything. So let's go into this one again. Edit mode, scale it out. And move it up so it's just resting on that new lip that I made. And then move the top face down so it covers everything. That's a good cap. Inset the top. Move it a little bit, give it a bit of a curve. And then do the same thing with the bottom as we did earlier, where I select the bottom, I inset it, and then I extrude it. In X-ray mode, to the point where it would cover the bottle. And then start rounding things out. Let's try a little experiment with this. Just to make it more reminiscent of this mechanic bottle, let's try and scooch this tip over a little bit. So I'll have to edit both the cap and the cap's cap. Wait, what's the right terminology here? Like a nozzle and a cap? Let's select them both and press tab to go into edit mode. Yes, you can edit multiple objects at the same time. And then go into wireframe, vertex selection, and select all the vertices at the top. Now looking at it from the perfect side, let's just click on, click on the y-axis, and that'll view everything from the side. And then I can move everything over a little bit, and then rotate it to something along the same, Maybe hold down Control to snap it to some logical increments and then move to match that increment. No, that's a bit too much. Something like that. And then rotate it to align with that new angle. And let's see, do I like that? I do. I think that's hilarious. Okay, I'll finish it off by selecting everything, right-clicking, and press Shade Auto Smooth. And this is my finished bottle. And that's the end. Great job sticking with it. That's pretty impressive, don't you think, Tiny Robin?
Nah, I could have done that.
Well, click all the buttons below, see what they do. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And leave a comment telling me what you're planning to do with this new skill. I love reading comments like that.
I want to hang out with you on bringyourownlaptop.com. This course continues there with a bunch more videos. It just picks up where we left off here and keeps going. That's where you learn how to make your models look super good, and you even make your own version of me.
If you make an account there, you also get access to everything that Dan's already made, like Premiere Pro course, After Effects, Photoshop, Lightroom, like an infinite number of courses as far as I can tell. And Dan is, as you know, an excellent teacher. It's great value, I highly recommend it. And if enough of you like this, then maybe Bring Your Own Laptop will have me back for an advanced course. I hope you've had fun. Happy blending.